My approach to the art world is how you can achieve richer surrounding environment. To me, this is very important. Life isn't very good unless your surroundings are beautiful.
More than anything, he set an example of what it was to live a life revolved around art and design and craft and materials.
And you never saw things the same after Russ. I mean, everything became visible.
Russell personified the issues of art in terms of it was an acceptable activity for a grown man to do seriously.
I think his students got a great deal more than they expected to get. It wasn't about how to make a painting. It was how to live one's life as an artist.
I wear this wild color all the time, which nobody in his right mind would do, but I also make bold things.
Born in 1912, Russell Day grew up on a farm outside of Meade, Washington. Provided with art supplies at a young age and encouraged by his parents to get an education, Russell pursued a college degree. He graduated with a degree in art from Washington State University in 1940, and in 1942 he received his teaching certificate.
He could do it. He could create, and he also could help other people create, and that in itself is an art. And he had this real passion for what he was doing, and no doubts about it, no apologies about it.
Known for his brilliant use of color and his extraordinary sense of design, Russell Day evokes delight and wonder from those who know him.
He loves brilliant color. Color and Russell Day are one and the same.
And here he is in an orange Corvette.
I just like the outrageousness of it, I guess.
Russell dressed like a walking painting.
You really are going to wear that?
Russell could never just be plain.
When Russell would come into a room, boy, he would cut a swath through that room.
Russell wasn't from Everett. He wasn't from the Earth. He was from Mars.
In my early years, I was taken to church, as most young people are, and I never listened much to what was going on, but I was always fascinated with what was going on in the windows, the stained glass windows.
This fascination led Russell to an early interest in the movie industry and subsequent work in theater lighting, which helped to create his appreciation for the interplay of light and color. Working with colored glass then became his passion when he went for his MFA at the University of Washington in the mid-1950s.
I was always fascinated with what light was doing to it. So I was using my glass as a manipulator of light, a modulator, if you will. And so each of my pieces pursued that from a different angle. They were so thrilled with what I produced that they talked Mr. Gonzalez, head of the art department and director of the Henry Art Gallery, into letting my thesis be shown in the Henry Art Gallery. And this was the first student thesis show to have been shown in the gallery. They devoted one room and painted it black, and with their lighting showed this glass off to the max.
From his early beginnings as a designer, Russell also worked his love of color into textiles he designed while in graduate school.
I've been under the belief that anybody can become an artist. I think art is a work of the mind. Real art is. And that you train the mind in the realm of art the same as you would in the realm of mathematics or English, whatever.
After 6 years of teaching art at the junior high and high school level, Russell became the first art teacher at Everett Junior College in Everett, Washington. He went on to build a department and a faculty that earned a reputation as a great place to go for art education on the West Coast.
Russell and the people that he surrounded himself with, Larry Bakke and Don Tompkins, took a very different view. Looked towards New York, looked towards Europe. Russell also was very interested in the crafts that came out of Cranbrook and other things, glass blowing and things that came out of the Midwest. They were not, did not sign on to this gray, Asian-inspired Northwest mystic stuff.
The department was known as being very progressive. We, for instance, were teaching life drawing and painting, paralleling anything that was going on at the university. We were the only community college that even had a life drawing class, let alone nude models. So we were progressive. We reached out into both the arts and the crafts community, bringing in artists to interact with the student and to talk with students, not necessarily always to teach, but just to simply be here and to be a part of the action.
Russ, Don Tompkins, and Larry Bakke all, they reinforced one another. Mm-hmm. They built on each other's classes. So that at the end of 2 years, I mean, we had basically covered everything that they've covered at the U in 4 years. And it was more coherent.
If you went to Everett, you could get into any art school the time that we were up there in the United States.
But I was good at driving students to produce the maximum of their abilities.
You just couldn't put work together the night before. If you did, you were just torn apart in a critique. And several students tried to do that. But you really had to put an effort into those classes. And Russell demanded it. Plus, you had to defend your work in front of Russell. So you lived in the art department.
He said presentation was half of the battle. And it had to be excellent. You know, your heart beat when you handed it in, you know.
Oh, I know.
It was scary. Yeah. You know, you're afraid he was going to frown.
That's another thing about a good teacher. He loves his students' work, and he's not afraid to display it, and he's not afraid to have some of their work.
I was a fiend when it came to expecting an awful lot of work out of students.
It's been now 40 years since I was in Russ's, the first design class that I had with him. And I still have nightmares that, you know, that I haven't been able to finish the light modulator project that he required.
And it was one on reflected color and light. It was that they would show color done in such a way that you would never see the source of the color.
We were doing planes in space, and he held up this thing I was kind of stole from Nam Gabo, and made it out of tin cans, you know, cut them on like a sheet metal. But I didn't know anything about welding or soldering or anything. So I heated it up to sort of put a patina on it so it would look good. It wouldn't look like a tin can anymore. And I used this tube of liquid weld. Liquid weld to hold it together. And Russ picked this up and he says, "Look at this. It's made out of metal. Probably should withstand at least a 5-foot fall, don't you think?" Bam! It just shattered into a million pieces. It was like, never did that again.
He wants to give them the opportunity to discover, and he leads them in this discovery, but he's also not afraid to critique them and give them good positive and negative critiques, and he's not afraid to let them know that they need to develop in another direction or they have done well in what they've done.
Well, you put the student through dozens and dozens of little experiences of coming up with exciting kinds of visual statements. And eventually you work from flat to three-dimensional. And it's more to get them aware of the beauty of form and the beauty of space, and you begin to interplay form and space and come up with a kind of gorgeousness, if you will. And once you achieve it, it's a great feeling.
Well, so what we did here was like we had to paint a composition and then analyze the composition. This is a achromatic composition with a value scale. And these are the values I used on the composition, and it had this one little touch of chroma in it. This is a warm theme.
I like it.
Do you?
Let's see it.
I like it.
This is something I
There
found
it
out.
is. Oh, there's that little white square.
Yeah, I think it would be fun to do them all over
I'd
again.
like to take the whole project.
Yeah, well, Tompkins did this. He passed along these things he called snappers. And as long as the composition worked more or less, they met the requirements, you could have some element in there that didn't belong there that would sort of energize everything else just because it was there. So, like the little white dots,
That's
take it
a
away,
snapper.
and that's a snapper. Yeah.
Russell called that the jewel.
The jewel.
The jewel. There was one thing that set it one level above, which is lacking in a lot of people's work, even today. Yeah, the snapper.
This little thing that just sort of whipped it over the edge. And
That's hard to do a lot. The hardest.
so, in this case, it was a little tree form.
Chuck Close is one of the better-known artists to have gotten his start under the tutelage of Russell Day.
You can't tell what you're looking at here except a bunch of circles.
Well, when I was, I did some circle and square. I did some jewelry which were based on circles within squares.
Yes.
And I did a project for a mural in Everett that was squares with circles, holes and stuff. And actually, the color is pretty much like the color I was using. And I get to make a little painting every square, so it's a little celebration with each one.
Though not a student of Russell's, glass artist Dale Chihuly sought Russell's advice on the preparation of his portfolio for graduate school.
His first portfolio was pretty bad. I made some suggestions to him, and he went back, and in a few days he came up again. Now he's coming up from Seattle to Everett to do this, and he brought a second example, and he brought a third example, and finally a fourth one. I'm sort of a perfectionist about things, especially when it comes to somebody else's work. And so Dale came up finally with just a magnificent portfolio.
He helped other artists, but he wasn't afraid to help other teachers. And he wasn't afraid to move into teaching organizations such as the National Art Education Association, the Pacific Arts Association, the Washington Art, which is called the Washington Art Education Association. He gave of his time.
As president of the Pacific Arts Association in the early 1960s, Russell spearheaded a major redesign of the organization's publication, the PAA Bulletin.
The Pacific Arts Association Bulletin reflected Russ Day. Russ Day is a designer, as a person who had a broad vision. He drew people from the whole West Coast to that endeavor, and not just to the publication, it's really as president of the association. Russell's interest in the whole span from what the arts are about, an understanding and a sensitivity, response to the creative process, but also having this real sense of design.
Russell's sense of design could also be found at Everett Junior College, where he felt that the entire campus should be exposed to art.
This school had a gallery space in what I call the foyer of the old student center. The foyer was between the student cafeteria facility, which was rather large, and the library. So it was kind of the space in between, and students would walk up in the doors and in the foyer. That's where Russell had the gallery.
This was put there on purpose because I felt then, as I do now, that art isn't learned in formal situations only, and that it is exposure that perhaps enlightens you as much as any of the teaching that we might give.
He always worked in class. And someone who does that, by example, says, this is worth doing. And that was a role model right there.
His jewelry, which he still creates today, ranges from rings to necklaces to beaded belts to designs he calls table jewelry, miniature sculptures.
He thinks of jewelry as sculpture. And so when you're not wearing it, it can be a piece of sculpture on the table. And so he sometimes develops these wonderful little mechanisms that holds the piece of jewelry up. And so it no longer is jewelry, but it's art, it's sculpture. It's no longer utilitarian, but it goes beyond that. His rings are very simple. His rings are beauty of a stone, the simplicity of how the stone is set into a very simple band, or maybe a little bit of decorative. Some are highly polished, some are not as highly polished, but he's not hiding the stone, he's showing it off. But the stone is not always the most important part, it's also how the stone fits in with the design. His necklaces, they have a little more complexity to them. His techniques are very simple techniques, simple soldering, simple drilling, hanging. Maybe he's done a little bit of casting and embellished it. His jewelry, like color, is very dominant. It's very strong. It's large, and he's not afraid of it. Of course, he's also in the tradition of, in some cases, adding found pieces to his jewelry as well.
Russell made jewelry and he bought beautiful works of art, and he basically decorated himself with them, and he did so the way that we would expect women to do at that time, and he did it. And I was very attracted to that. This was a man who was not afraid to dress himself up like a work of art, and he did so all of the time. And so his jewelry was very much a statement about his character and about his aesthetics. His whole life was about his aesthetics.
Russell was an artist who looked elegant and who made no bones about it. His jewelry it was massive. And you had to look at it. It wasn't made so you could kind of see it. Oh, well, gee, Russell's wearing a ring today. It would be that big. It would be silver, and it would be interesting, and there'd be tiny stuff in it. And that was just part of what he was wearing that day. And his tie and shirts of colors you couldn't buy in Everett. He got them someplace. He was just fun to watch.
At one point, he got a toupee. It was a really high-quality toupee. It didn't look like a dead animal, on his head. But he would only wear it when he would dress up. It wasn't to fool anyone. Everybody knew that he'd lost a lot of hair up there. And most days he would not wear it at all. But if he was going out to dinner or something, he would put it on the way someone would put on a tie or put on a hat.
When he walked in the room, the first thing you'd do, as I would, is notice what he was wearing. And think about that. Then I could hardly wait to see what Marjorie was wearing that day. See what sort of, huge and spectacular pendant or whatever she'd be wearing. They were walking lessons, They were the art.
Russell and his wife Marjorie have been a team since 1943. They met on the ski slopes of Mount Spokane, and a couple of years later, Russell proposed in the souvenir shop at Paradise Inn on Mount Rainier. Marjorie is Russell's biggest fan and the gracious wearer of Russell's jewelry.
Well, I just feel honored to wear it. He loves to buy jewelry too, though, and I only have one neck.
Well, they love each other very much. They support each other, both educators. They have a lot in common, although, you know, he's more artistic, she's more in the literary field, you know, being a literature teacher and English teacher. But their passion for life is very similar.
I look at the two of them really as one, and I look at the two of them as both being art.
Marjorie had a very wonderful way of bringing the written word out of students just as Russell did the visual. And so students that would take Marjorie's class often would end up taking a design class or a drawing class or something, and quite frankly the other way around. So they became kind of a strong team. If you liked Russell, you were going to love Marjorie, or vice versa. Between the two of them, they had a very major impact on campus.
But what I didn't realize is that they were very much a team in their youth, too. They're traveling, they're taking bicycle tours through Europe, climbing mountains, engaging in every kind of a crazy adventure that anybody in the world could. They've really lived.
We have been on top of Mount Rainier twice.
From the Arctic to the Antarctic to the Himalayas and every civilized and uncivilized place in the world, they've been there.
They traveled the world and brought back evidence of what was going on elsewhere. That was really exciting. They brought back great objects and great stories.
Everything he collects has a certain kind of quality and a certain kind of meaning, and he can talk about why he picked it up, why he thinks it's good quality, why he thinks it's good design.
We would never have started all our travels if he hadn't thought of it. You know, I look at it. We get a magazine, Time magazine, and it tells about youth hustling in Europe after the war. And I read the article, Russell reads the article, Russell says, let's go.
I've often wondered why Marjorie and I travel like we do. But I think that while we're not the greatest adventurers in the world, we have a lot more adventure in our spirit than most people do. That allows us to be free to do things that most people can't do.
And you could turn and look at Russell and you could point to his life, his home, his lovely wife. Every aspect of what he was about was to be seen. It wasn't rhetoric. You lived this way.
Russell and Marjorie's home in Everett was featured in numerous newspapers and architectural magazines during the years they lived there.
To me, the house was always a fountain of inspiration. The patterns of light that I got because I put Venetian blinds on all the windows, because that was the only way I could see to control the light without using drapes, which would completely cover up the outdoor view. And we had a magnificent view.
It was a low house and had these wonderful tall fir trees. The whole image, you know, is like a photograph if you were going to frame something. I don't know whether he couldn't have planted the trees, but it's as though he had planted the trees.
It had reflecting pools and full of goldfish, which the raccoons would come and eat.
And so the reflections of the house or of the trees, when you're looking in the house, you had reflections in the water of that landscape. When you looked from the other direction toward the house, you had another wonderful phenomena.
What influenced me were such places as Alhambra in Spain. It occurred to me that here in these dry desert areas, that they did such wonderful things with the design and beautification of water. And here I live in the wet Northwest, And nobody does much to control and shape water.
I mean, who do you know that has peacocks wandering around in the garden and being reflected in the reflecting ponds? It was like a real experience being there with them, an aesthetic experience.
And it was always a place for artists to go to. They were always there to entertain and to hold court and to take care of people and inspire people. They really loved the whole education learning process.
He was an effective teacher because he was a jeweler, and because when he built that home in Everett, because he was so totally committed to how that was designed, how that was put together, and that he's almost obsessed, and he still is, with how things fit together in terms of their relationships. He's always designing.
Of course, I'm prejudiced about the role that design plays, because that teaches you to be creative. It's tremendously interesting how these circles and the...
Please don't touch the art.
Oh, you scared the hell out of me.
I know, you jumped.
To order this tape, visit us on the web at www.livingtreasuresproject.org or write to Living Treasures, P.O. Box 31611, Seattle, Washington 98103.